Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm an alcoholic.
What's up, Joseph?
So me and Derek are not allowed to speak at the same events anymore because he took all my talking points. Now I guess the best way to do it for me is to start at the beginning of the end for me, right? So I came home from work. I was working 2 jobs. I came home from work and I walked in to my house and I said hi to my mom, hi to my dad. And my dad never said nothing to me. And I walked into my girlfriend at the time and I said, I'll never say hi to my dad when I walk in this house ever again. And later that night, I went to sleep and my mom woke me up frantically, telling me like my dad was down. And long story short, like my dad literally died like underneath my hands, right? And so that was traumatic, and I didn't realize it at the time. But I always and anybody that's heard my story knows that like I wore that. Like I used to tell like my brothers, like you wouldn't be able to deal with that, you know, not realizing that I wasn't able to deal with that. You know what I mean? And so I always blamed it on COVID, on like me diving headfirst into drinking, right? But it was really that trauma, and I didn't realize that until after, you know, long after, like I went through this process. So I went down a path, and you know, like we all do, like self-sabotage, right? Like I burnt my life to the ground. I quit my job. I broke up my girlfriend. And I was in a space, and so I wound up, you know, kind of falling into goodwill with my brother, and he got me a job at the place I work at now. Honestly, God blessing. And I knew that entire year after that I wanted to stop drinking. I just, you know, I thought that I could do it by myself, like most of us, right? And so, excuse me. I would not drink for like a week and then go on like a 10-day bender, you know what I mean? Or like I would drink for an entire day and then be blacked out, you know, for the next 2. And so finally one day, I called out of work after a 3-day bender because I was too hungover to drink. Too hungover to go to work, not too hungover to drink. But so I called my job, or I didn't call my job, and because I didn't have an excuse. You know, I did every excuse in the book at that point. And so finally, you know, 3 days later, I called him and I told him I have a problem. And this is how I know that there is a God of my understanding. Because there's no way that I would have admitted that I had a problem. I didn't even believe it myself, right? I was just trying to save my job, you know? And so then I went into RCA, you know, the whole time I'm like, I'm Joseph, I'm an alcoholic, and that was easy for me to say, you know, but literally the issue was that I was a trash can, you know, I would take anything to get out of my own brain, you know what I mean, because I'm just not comfortable there, right? And so all these traumas and tragedies that have happened in my life, you know, it was easy to just do something to get away from that, right? And so, and in that process, a couple of weeks in, I remember walking past the room and I heard this music, and music is my love language, that and food, you know, if you couldn't tell. But so I walked past this room and I heard like this music, and I walked into this room and it was like prayer music, you know, worship music. And I sat in there for a couple of days, and this fellow named Chad Cross, he was talking about like asking God for forgiveness, you know, and I was like, you know, all right, it's easy enough, right? And so I wrestled with it for a couple of days, and I asked God for forgiveness, and you know, I wasn't getting an answer. You know what I mean? Like, and you know us, like when we ask for something, like you need to tell me something, you know. So I finally walked up to him a couple of days later, and I asked him. I said, yo, I asked God for forgiveness. How do I know He forgave me? And he goes, you sure you asked God for forgiveness? I said, yeah, 100%. He said, well, maybe you should start forgiving yourself. And it clicked. just like that. And I knew at that moment that I needed something bigger than myself. And so there's a solution, right? And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until, months and maybe even a year later, that my solution is in the book. And so along the way, somebody gave me that book, and like Derek said, they told me it wasn't a stop drinking book, it was a start living book. And so I didn't realize it then. I didn't know what the guy was talking about. Yeah, thank you, appreciate the gift. But I didn't open it. I read the book, but I didn't understand any of it. And so along the way, I learned, the solution starts with, I can't, he can, so let him. And it was just as simple as that. And once I realized that, and I couldn't do it by myself. We read these words and it looks like jumble, gibberish to us. So that's the point of getting sponsorship, and being of service and all this, because it allows us to have an outer, a different set of eyes on ourselves, because we're in this fantasy. Or me, let me speak for myself. I was in a fantasy land, and I told myself all these different realities in my life, but it was all nonsense. It was all just manipulation of me, and so finally I got a sponsor, and I started doing these steps, and once you go through that step 5, and your sponsor tells you, it's you, it's like, oh, really? Well, maybe you're right. I said, no, I'm right. You don't know what you're talking about, so just listen. And so as I go through this process, I start becoming more accountable, right? And how do I become accountable? By being honest. And I can sit here and tell you, I was being honest, with everybody in here, but it was an honest to God lie. I wasn't honest with myself, and that's where the problem lied. And so once I started to become honest with myself, that's when the magic happened for me. And I didn't see it. People seen it, way before I ever thought anything was happening, but that was the gift. Was being able to be honest with myself. Somebody said earlier, I think it was the last speaker said, I can go sneak and I've had multiple times where I said, yeah, I can go get away when I'm getting drug tested from my job on a regular basis. And every time I would get done with it, and I knew I was clean, that's such a blessing, right? But I said, I can go sneak one. Nobody will know. But the problem is, I'll know. And that's where the heat comes from. That's where the gift is. I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because that's the blessing in all this. I'll know. And if I know, it's wrong. It's not right. You don't want to go back to that, because there's nothing but a lonely, miserable road at the end of that. For me, because then I start believing in my own stuff. And I don't have any of the answers at all. It all starts with a power of mind, a higher power of my understanding, right? And so that is, to me, it's a fantastic feeling, understanding that I am a work in progress. I'll never be perfect, and that I need to practice these principles in all my affairs. And I know that's just not going to happen. That's not, it's not always attainable. But as long as I try, and as long as I understand that I know right from wrong, I'm going to make a bad decision, but being honest and accountable to those bad decisions is where the work is. I'm never going to be perfect, but as long as I progress, each and every, for me, at a point, each and every minute had to be, and then that turned into each and every hour, and then that turned into each and every day, and after a couple of days, I start feeling good about myself, and that self-confidence comes back, and I feel like with God, I can conquer anything. Now it's the different goals that I want. That's where that's where this solution is brought me, is that I'm blessed enough to know that I can do anything, but I can't do anything without my higher power. I can't do anything without the steps. I can't do anything without being honest with the people around me. The blessing in this program for me is having people around me that I love, that'll tell me the truth about myself, and that I'm willing to understand, and willing to listen to that, right? And so somebody mentioned earlier about this God-sized void, you know, and I didn't know what that looked like, you know. It was always, that's how I felt it. I felt it with my drinking and using and, you know, and now I don't need that. You know, I have genuine love. I have forgiveness. I have all these good traits that I got from nothing else but my solution, because my solution used to be at the bottom of a bottle, you know, or at the bottom of a bag. And so I'm just blessed to be here tonight. I'm blessed to be able to enjoy these moments. Blessed to be able to talk to you people, because you people are me. You know, I am you. And the first word in the book is we. I can't do it by myself. Like I have to be able to, I have to be around you folks, because that's the only way I can be honest with myself. Because the minute that I start thinking that I have all the answers, I sit in one of these seats and one of you guys tell me what I was gonna do back then and what I can potentially do tomorrow. So I have to make sure that I'm honest with myself to understand that I need this program. That is my solution now. That's all I got. That's what I'm sharing.